actually a little bit boring, and it can all be about technical skill and sitting down and learning how to actually create specific stitches, which is really valuable, but not so much for us today. So I'm just going to teach you a few different ways that you can use thread as a tool and stitch as a tool, and then I want to see what you can kind of come up with. So sort of no sort of prescriptive, like we're not going to be doing straight lines, anything like that. It's up to you to use it how you want to. Because all stitch is, it's just mark making. So in the same way that we'd use, you know, the heat press inks or a pen or whatever, it's just a series of marks. So what we're going to do first of all is, actually if you probably come and stand behind me, we'll see if this works. Sometimes it looks a bit like a chain. You're all much too far away, so you need to come closer because you can't possibly see what I'm going to do. This is split stitch. See, it's a little bit like a braid, rope kind of effect. So basically what you do, and it's going to be quite delicate to see, so I'm going to do a normal stitch. Now for split stitch, you don't want to make them too small at first because it's fiddly. So I'm going to make mine about that size. Now instead of, you know, coming up, whoops, kind of here, what you're going to do to actually get it to split, you're literally going to split the thread with the needle. So you want to come up in that stitch from underneath in the halfway point. But you want to make sure you're actually coming up between pieces of thread.
Does that have to be 3 on each side?
No, it doesn't. It's totally up to you. It actually works really well. So this is 6. You get a much more dramatic effect. I'm only using 3, so it's going to be a lot more subtle. But so come up at the halfway point in between the thread. And then come back in for your next stitch. Okay, so same thing again. Go back to that stitch you've just created, and I've got my glasses on. You come up in the middle, so you split the thread, come back down, and then same thing again, and you just keep on splitting them every time you go. So this one is really subtle, but you can see it's actually giving it a bit more texture.
Oh yeah.
The split's not so obvious. Oh, have you got a Textiles WhatsApp group?
Yeah.
Oh, that's handy. That's brilliant.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, so give that a go. So one last thing I'll show you, because you've only got about 20 minutes or so. Another really nice one, I don't think I've got it on here, is stem stitch. No, so stem stitch looks like a stem, kind of. Again, looks a bit rope-like. So I'm going to make a normal stitch, like so. Now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to come up right next to that stitch, not through it, next to it, halfway up. Okay, so like so. And then I'm going to come back into that original line. So this one, stem stitch, is normally always worked in a line of some description. So I'm going to find that bit and I'm just going to pull my needle along so it's fairly straight, and I'm going to come back through. This is where it is helpful to draw a line. Okay. Then I'm going to come back to that previous stitch and push through. Mine is a bit wibbly wobbly, but can you see what's happening?
So it's kind of like a diagonal.
Kind of. I mean, it should be a bit straighter than this, but I haven't drawn out a straight line, so I'm sort of guesstimating.
Kind of like a broken line? Or like
Kind of. But it kind of staggers it,
It's really nice.
which can be really nice. Again, these ones tend to work better with a thicker bunch, but they can be really nice just to get added texture or added interest in. This bunch of odd bits and bobs. Just going to lay it down. So I can pin it if I want to, and then it's literally just a case of coming up to one side of your material. Oh, I did not the end. So come up. Now the one thing just to bear in mind is because these stitches are actually going to be holding everything down. So So you want to make them quite tight when you come over. So I've just gone under that bunch a little bit. And I'm just going to tie this, because I didn't knot my thread first of all. But that's not something particular to couching, that's just a lazy embroiderer. There we go. Okay, and then so you just carry on. So, you know, if you're using a bunch, you can twist it, you can shape it, you can do whatever you want with it. You can make the stitches tiny. You can leave massive gaps. Stitch it, you know, I could stitch this in a really thin dark blue so I can barely see it, so it looks like it's just floating. Go over. Or you can make the stitches really dense when you're going over the same spot over and over again, like here. You know, I could then start to actually split this out a little bit if I wanted to. I think you need about 5 hands for this, you know, and then maybe I'll start stitching on another bit. Really nice way of adding dimension. It's so easy. So what I've put out on the table is lots and lots of different yarns and textile materials. There's bunches of yarns in there, so go and find something that resonates with you in your research and start to actually build that into your embroidery composition in some way. Okay? Done it? Good.
That's not very good.
No practice. Keep practicing. With needles, there's loads of different types of needles. So you've got very, very fine needles. So that's if you're sewing with something very fine, you'd always put a fine needle on. Because if you use a thick needle, what's going to happen is it's going to rip through the fabric. So if you were sewing with something like a fine silk, and you used a really thick needle, it would just puncture it basically. So for us, I'm going to use an 80, which is sort of suitable for the fabric we're using, kind of thinnish to medium weight. And the needle actually makes an enormous difference. Because if the needle's a little bit blunt, even that will affect your sewing. Alright, so to thread your machine, so take your thread, that just stays on your spool. Now it's basically a big series of hooks. Flip this around into the back. So hook number 1 is this one. So you're going to take this, hook that in there, then you're going to run it into this channel. I'm going to swivel it around. Whoops. So I brought it through there. Then I'm going to bring it all the way down to this hook, and then you just hook it in from the bottom and pull. Then I'm coming back up to here. If this isn't visible or isn't easily accessible, all you, excuse me, hiccups, all you do is you just rotate that until it is. Hooks in there. Comes all the way down. So right on top of the needle, there's this horseshoe flat hook, which you then pass that through. So what we've actually made there, whoops, it's liable to fall out, is an N. You just turn it back to front. And then I thread my needle. So I'll show you that one more time. And then we can ready to stitch. But what I'm going to do is I need to put my foot on, but because we're using a hoop, sometimes if we put the foot on the machine and then try to get this under, it won't go under. So you can see how nice and tight this is. Now we're actually going to work the opposite way to the way we were working last week. So with hand embroidery we were stitching this way, weren't we, with the raised surface towards us. If we use that in the machine, that way it's going to jam the machine because there's too much space between the fabric and the bottom of the machine. So instead we work flat, so just make sure your fabric goes in nice and flat. So all we're going to do...
That feels so tight.
By pulling it and tightening it. You want it around that.
Okay.
Because if it's loose, the problem is it drags on the needle and it can easily pucker it up. So just keep tightening it. They are a bit irritating. Perseverance. Okay, so you're going to guide that underneath. So here I've got, that's my top thread coming from here, underneath is my bottom. Now you might remember, on top of the foot you've got this open channel. So this open channel is going to match up with this cone right behind my needle, right there. Okay? So I always just bring mine in, you can lift it up a bit actually. So you can bring yours in at an angle. Sometimes it can be a little bit awkward, so what you want to do is right at the back of the machine, there's this lever. I know it's really hard for you to see. The lever here. So that raises and lowers the foot. So make sure that's up, then it just makes that easier. Guide that in. Now, right to the side, at the back, there's yet another hook. It's a very small hook. That's the hook that actually holds the foot in place. So you need to make sure you bring that down there. But I'll come around and look at all of yours, make sure it's all okay. All right? A couple of things for you to look at actually, I'll write them on here. So psychogeography, let's try and remember. I'm going to Google it. And actually this psychogeography could be a really interesting task for you to do. So, as it says here, it's basically the intersection of psychology and geography. So, it's all about creating a map that's very personal to you for whatever reason. So, it's not about creating a to scale, precise map. It's more about using your own experiences. Wash it away, you're then left just with this amazing stitch drawing. So, it looks like it's literally been stitched in air. Pass it around, you'll feel how thick it is. It's very, very dense.
What's in there? Is it gelatin?
Yeah, it's gelatin. Yeah. It's I think this one's a synthetic gelatin. Now this dissolves, oh, this is hot water and cold water. I think this is warm water, this one. But I'll talk to you about the actual dissolving bit later. But it offers tremendous potential. You can draw onto it with the sewing machine and you can stitch anything at all. So it can be abstract, it can be literal, it can be massive, it can be a small scale. Only thing with it is it can be a little bit temperamental, and it's temperamental to air temperature as well, to the moisture in the air. It also takes a while to do it. So don't worry if you don't get it finished today, because we can come back to it. So what we're going to do first of all is you're going to hoop it up, but you're going to use 2 layers together as one, because it just creates a bit more stability. So let's get that bit first done, and then I'm going to show you some images on our brand new projector, which is very exciting. It works. Dissolvable, and she makes these installations all from freehand machine embroidery and sometimes digital embroidery. She then washes it all away and creates these massive, you don't really get a sense of the scale, but these massive installations. She uses a lot of floral imagery, but she constructed items from her living room on a massive scale.
Is that the one with the bike?
Yeah, I think there's a bike and an iron, a rucksack. Yeah, here, living room. So it's a little bit small. So that's all stitched and they're all life size. You can also make 3D forms because, say this is all stitched, say I've stitched a big one, and then I'm coming to wash it all away. Well, say I wanted to make a bowl shape, I could take a football or something round, place that around the football, pretend my hand's a football, place that around the football, then get a sponge, load it up with water and actually sponge it away around the form, leave it to dry, then I'd simply be able to lift off that sculptural form. Or you can stitch flat, wash things away, then start to actually stitch them together to make something three-dimensional. You can wire the edges. She did a lovely set of work. Yeah, see, have a look at this one. This isn't the one, but this installation called Icebox. And then when you get up close to it, it's all these amazing forms. Looks like it's been laser cut, but it's all stitched, slotted together. So you can do
with textile artists. I feel like they're so patient. Like
we are.
Their patience is.
We tend to be a bit weird and very patient.
Very patient.
And also quite friendly.
Yes, definitely.
So this one, I absolutely love this one. It's from 2015, Moving Boxes. So she constructed these 3D fruit boxes that look like they're just floating in air. So she has a real, strong aesthetic of her own. One more person I'll show you, because there's actually not that many people working with this in an interesting way, is Meredith, I think Woolnough, I'm not sure how you say her surname. Hers is all inspired by natural forms.
I'm thinking about Isabel and her nets that she wants to do.
Oh yes, exactly. So this would be, it's perfect for making lace-like things, grids, nets, anything like that. But you can be incredibly precise about it, which Meredith is. So you can draw onto the dissolvable first of all, but you have to be really careful about the pen you use, because obviously as soon as you put water with it, the pen's, so it's open to experimentation, the type of pen. But you can do beautiful things with colour blending. So just how you use the thread, how you use your top thread and your bobbin thread. You could use any type of material, you could hand stitch, it can be, whoops. Oh,
Works much better with a machine or hand stitch?
I think it works better with mainly machine, with hand just adding an extra element of texture or surface, because all of the stitches have to be connected. You'll see when I show you, and with hand stitch it's very laborious to get that to happen. So I'd always machine stitches your surface and then build it up. So I'll show you what we do. So exactly as it's set up, using the freehand foot. I'm going to boots mine up, haven't I? So you've got your two pieces. Now, try not to get any water near it if you're drinking water or whatever, because it will dissolve. And even if you've got sweaty hands in the summer, it starts to dissolve. Now I've given you quite a big piece as well. So as I said, we can come back and finish things off. You also might find that it may loosen off a bit as you're stitching, so you might need to take it out of the machine, tighten it, etc. Now this also is liable to tearing. I'm not saying this to put you off, I'm just letting you know. So if it tears, don't worry about it. We can easily fix it, normally by just taking another bit and patching it on. Okay, so nice and tight. So it's just like embroidery onto calico. You want to keep it moving. We want to try and avoid any jams if we can. because this material's not so forgiving. If it jams, it tends to rip a hole in it, but there's ways around it. So, and then what we do is we stitch. So I'm just going to go for another circle. So remember, foot down and keep it moving. So there's my funny little oval. If I was now to wash that away, it wouldn't hold because there's not enough thickness or stability. And also I've only gone round in one direction. So the idea is, you'll be able to see it from this little piece, is if you look at it up close, maybe, whoops, look at it where the orange is as well, is I've gone up, down, left to right, I've cross-hatched. So always the thread, it's not just going around in one direction, it's crossing over so it's interlocked. So that's really important, because if there isn't enough stability, when you wash it away, you'll literally just be left with straggly thread, which isn't what we're after. So I'm just going to keep going. I'm just going to make mine a little bit bigger. So I've got my outline, so you can start off with your outline and then go in and fill it in. So you can see I'm going side to side, I'm going up and down, I'm bridging across both outlines to really make sure I'm getting it nice and dense. And this works beautifully if you blend different colours, so you do a bit of stitching in one colour, then switch to another one. So you'll be able to see, if you come a little bit closer, I'll move out the way. See how thick that is. Just switch that off. So have a feel of it. See how thick that actually needs to be. That's how thick it is, sort of at a minimum. So from that point upwards would be fine to then wash away if the whole thing was covered. So, you know, by all means, following on from collage this morning, once you've got a nice base layer stitch, then start to incorporate other bits of fabric, bits of thread, you know, whatever. But do work directly from your sketchbook, okay? Really tight up close views of women. Normally have thought, you've got something at home, they have flowers. And, you know, they've got a beautiful porcelain skin, everything's very smooth, and they're gazing very romantic into the distance of something, you know, and it's very, very romantic portrait. So these have got that quality to a certain, like black cement next this week, I think. Not to do quite fun, but it's to kind of let you get on with what you want, but we still have to do certain techniques. So, yeah, it's fun. Yeah, yeah, you didn't. That's just a bit of fabric trim. It's hard not to like stuff down. This is what the